Good evening, everyone, and welcome to TriVersity Talk. I am Stephen Bloomer T.
And I am Wendy Stewart Kaplan, and we are so happy that tonight, Sunday night, you're choosing to be here with us.
Absolutely. Wendy, how are you feeling?
Oh my God, I'm a bull of anxiety about the election. I'm very happy. I did finally get to early vote. I went to the polls every day in my neighborhood, 4 and 5 hour waits. Finally on Friday, it was like a little less than 40 minutes, and I got to early vote. So thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness.
How are you doing?
I am about as anxious can be, though I realize there are people that are a lot more anxious about this than I am. So I am relieved that this is almost going to be behind us, but also again, do I want it to be behind us? I hope so.
Won't be watching TV on Tuesday. I can't.
Netflix, baby.
You're gonna
Netflix. All Netflix up in here. So we have a wonderful guest for you all tonight. But before we get to tonight's guest, do my usual spiel.
Go for it.
You know, whether you're watching this on Facebook or on YouTube, please give us a like or a subscribe or a thumbs up or however it is that you manifest your love and support for TriVersity on these platforms. And also, we are doing a needs assessment survey. This will be the last time I ask on this show. If you haven't taken the survey, to please click this link right here. You can find that in the comments on both Facebook and YouTube. It's a quick survey, takes you about 10 to 20 minutes, and you're eligible to win a $25 Amazon gift card.
Ooh,
should you take part. So I mean, come on, that's a carrot worth pursuing. Christmas is coming up. And I guess with that, that's all I have in terms of my spiel. So
okay.
Wendy, would you like to introduce our next guest?
I think we have a fantastic guest tonight that's perfect right before this election. Okay, she's huge advocate. Juli Grey-Owens is the executive director of Gender Equality in New York, and she's got a lot to say. So Juli, come on in.
Welcome.
Hi there.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
So great to have you here with us.
Well, really happy to be here.
So Juli, tell us more about Gender Equality in New York. I mean, a little bit of history, what the mission is.
Very good. Well, basically, Gender Equality in New York started as an advocacy organization that we started here in Long Island called LITAC, Long Island Transgender Advocacy Coalition, back in 2005.
Wow, wow. Back in 2005, things have changed a lot since then, too.
Oh, absolutely. And we did a lot of work just around Long Island in trying to promote the need for transgender civil rights at the time. Our community was the last community in New York State to receive our civil rights. We didn't actually receive them until January of 2019. So we did a lot of demonstrations locally. The Senate Majority Leader actually lived here on Long Island, so we were in his district office at least once a session, doing a demonstration because he refused to bring the Civil Rights Bill to the floor for a vote. So we did a number of things, but as we went on, we realized that we really needed to work statewide rather than just regionally. What made it worse was, in 2015, we had a statewide LGBT advocacy organization called the Empire State Pride Agenda. It was actually the largest state advocacy group in the nation. I know that because
wow.
Yeah, I knew that because I was on the board for 2 successive 3-year terms. I rolled off in March of 2014. And during that period of time, we were able to get marriage equality passed here in New York State, which started the ball rolling, and eventually the Supreme Court would do their thing. But throughout that period of time, we were getting money from a lot of donors from the LGBT community, and things were very positive. Once marriage equality passed, money became in short supply, and in November of 2015, they announced that they were closing. And we still, as a community, did not have our civil rights yet. So we were left high and dry, basically.
Yeah, really.
So what I did was I started reaching out to a number of my trans contacts, and we started putting together a program of doing transgender forums across New York State. And I think the first 2 or 3, I guess it was the first 2 years, we did over 20 forums across New York State. Now, New York State is a big state. We were all the way up to Plattsburgh, which is right just below the Canadian border. Right, all the way out to Buffalo, Jamestown, Albany, Rochester, big and small, towns, urban, suburban, and rural, didn't matter. We did them in an attempt to try to connect our community, because now we've lost the statewide advocacy organization. There's no work being done now on trying to get the bill passed. So that was our starting point. And shortly after, go ahead.
I'm just curious, some of those areas that you're talking about that you went to, how many people would show up? How were you received? Were people grateful for what you were bringing to the party? Oh,
yeah. We never felt like somehow we were inappropriate or in the wrong place. I mean, everyone was always very friendly. What's really surprising is the southern tier of New York State, which is just along basically the Pennsylvania line, just north of the Pennsylvania line, in a place called Hurleyville, we had one of our largest audiences of close to 75 people coming out. So, so very positive as far as that goes.
Great response.
Yeah, and this is in the middle of farm country, so it was really, really critical to be able to do that. So as we started putting things together, we determined that we should start doing work on seeing if we could put together a statewide advocacy organization specifically for transgender and non-binary people. And that was the starting work of Gender Equality New York. And, during that period of time, we were able to get some grants from an organization here on Long Island, which was very helpful. And we have incorporated, we are now approved by the IRS as a 501c3. So, very positive as far as that goes. Our board is from various parts all over New York State. I happen to be here on Long Island, and there's another one of our board members here on Long Island, but the rest of the board members are, in Buffalo, near Rochester or Syracuse area, Albany, the North Country. So, we're spread out, and we've done that on purpose, so that we'd be all a part of trying to connect the big state together.
Yeah.
So I mean, Julie, kind of on what you just described, I mean, is the LGBT community supportive? I mean, how tight is our alliance? It's
well, that's I think perhaps the older you are, the more the split is. Let's put it that way. I think younger people are a lot calmer and cooler, but there were a lot of tough years for those of us who've been doing the work for a while, and we really believe that it was disgraceful that basically the LGBT community walked away from us. Now, that's not everyone. There were some wonderful LGBT advocates who stayed with us and worked with us and have been helpful and, did all the right things. But when you talk about money, when you talk about numbers, when you talk about power, it was disappointing at best. And I guess what bothered me more was there was a number of LGBT community centers, which of course have 0 trans people on their board, that type of thing. Right. When we finally did get the law passed, they were front and center waving flags and holding signs. And it was like, you're kidding me, right? Really? So it's tough.
But what about now when there's so many people that are in that T, in that letter T, so many people have transitioned. I know certainly here in Pennsylvania, and this was something that was an enigma to me. Anyone I knew that had transitioned did it in their 20s. In Pennsylvania, I was first meeting people that, had lived lives, right? Raised kids, and at the age of 50 on upward, and I really say on upward, we're transitioning, and that brings a whole other host of things with it. So don't you think that things have expanded now that the LGBT community is more supportive because so many people are living their truth now?
Well, and again, my thoughts may be, colored by my past experiences,
Yeah.
but I would say that we have found that all the people who were out for marriage equality, many of them have just completely disappeared. They got what they wanted, and now they're gone.
Yeah.
And as far as, when you talk about the growth of the transgender community, I would suggest that what's happened is that it depends on which generation you are. And by that, I mean
Very
millennials and what is it, Gen Z, I think it is, are much more comfortable with coming out. And those of us who are baby boomers are now retired and are looking at our time clock and going, I don't have much time left. I'm going to transition now.
Yeah.
But there's a whole group of people in the middle, what was the Generation X, I believe it was, which was directly behind us. Guess what? They still are in the process of, trying to keep a job, buy a home, raise a family, get their kids through college.
Yeah.
And so transition in their generation is maybe a little bit more than it was for the boomers, but it certainly is not the way it is for the millennials or for the boomers now as more and more are coming out. So it's generational, and it actually makes sense when you think about the fact that the danger still of being transgender and being denied employment or housing or services of any kind, even with laws in our favor. And again, just remember, we're talking about state laws. There are no federal laws protecting us, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. So Julie, when it comes to one of your organization's, chief mission is really education.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're talking about, what I love is that your organization, in terms of educating, doesn't just do the LGB, it does the other letters that people either intentionally or unintentionally flub trying to make a statement. And so, so why did your organization and you feel it's so important to get out there and do that kind of education work?
Well, right after we did the town halls, where we were meeting with our community out there, it was very clear we were getting cisgender people coming to our meetings. Now, I will mention for those who may or may not understand the word cisgender, that means that you are a person, if you're cisgender, you are a person whose personal identity matches the designation that you were given at birth.
Yeah.
Everything regarding gender starts in that moment of birth when the baby comes out. And so we found that there was a lot of misinformation, there was a lot of confusion. And while we were trying to start working on passing the Transgender Civil Rights Bill, we realized a couple of things. Number one was that education was badly needed, especially with legislators and heads of agencies and that type of thing. They just really don't understand. So that's part one. Part two is that we're a small community and we need as many allies as possible. So when we start doing trainings and things, people who see the trainings leave for the most part as allies. I really have to tell you, one of the things we have now been continuing doing forums across the state, whether it's colleges or churches or schools or whatever it happens to be. But I cannot think of a case where we have done a forum where at the end of the forum, we really didn't have the audience literally rush the panelists in a very positive sense. I don't mean, anything disastrous, but just going up, oh my God, your story was so amazing. I didn't realize this. I didn't understand that. So that was a big part of it. And the other thing that we learned was that a small community of people called the Intersex Community, which is very misunderstood and is really not a part of the transgender community.
Like, can you define that for people that are watching? Not everybody
Sure.
knows what that is.
Well, the terminology in the past would have been hermaphrodite, which is no longer used. It's an inappropriate term for that community of people. But what we're talking about is people who are born with a natural biological variation in their gender. Some people, that variation is noticeable when they're born. Some of that variation may be noticeable when they go through puberty, and some may not be apparent at all until after they're an adult and they're still dealing with some kinds of health concerns, and they start looking into it and go, oh my God, you're intersex.
Yeah.
And the problem for intersex people is there's a stigma attached. Instead of us understanding that it's a natural biological function, it's like being red-haired with green eyes. That's the way it is. And for us to support it. So, when we first started, I was told, well, don't go there because you're not a part of the community and you shouldn't be talking about it. And I'm like, well, okay, so we didn't. But then I started meeting intersex community members, and it became very real that they needed a platform to get their information out.
Sure.
So we have aggressively tried to make sure that, first of all, with members of the community, we make sure that what we're presenting is something that they, give us a thumbs up with.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as they're happy with what we're saying, we think that it helps actually tell the story of gender. Most people want to put people in a box because it's easy to deal with.
Easy to label if they're in a box.
Right, exactly. And our whole mission and message is that forget about boxes. Let's talk about a continuum. And by continuum, you could talk about a rainbow. I like to look at just a straight line and just let everyone know that in the area of biological sex, in the area of gender identity, in the area of gender expression, in the area of sexual orientation, we're not this box or this box. We're somewhere along a line, and each of us has one particular point that is our point. And it may be left or right of your point. It really doesn't matter. We're all on this continuum together.
Yeah.
And your identification, in all the various areas will, it'll be like your report card, but there's no right or there's no wrong. It's just where your position is.
It's your personal.
So we're working very hard in trying to get that message across. And when we talk about intersex people, the first thing off, it's the first area where people are like, well, of course there's only male and female. Well, no, there isn't. And after you break down that one, then it gets a little easier to understand that gender identity could be more than just, man or woman, but a whole lot of different things along the line. Again, infinite number.
Such incredible, important work that you're doing.
So Julie, kind of on this subject, I want to do a role-playing exercise, at least on my end.
Okay.
I want to pretend to be someone who is respectfully ignorant about some of the topics that they could come into, everything you wanted to know about transgender, non-binary, and intersex people, but were afraid to ask. Because my hope is that some people who are respectfully ignorant of these topics will tune in. So I have a few questions, some of which have been answered already, so that's cool. But to start, I would say, people often talk about the term gender identity. What does that mean exactly? Right.
Well, the first question I would ask you, as a cisgender man, again, I'm assuming that, I don't know that for sure. I don't never know what's in anyone's heart, but I can talk from a probability standpoint that 99.4% of the world is cisgender. We now have experts that have said 0.6% includes the transgender and non-binary community.
Wow.
So that's a starting point. So the first thing is that I would ask you, when did you decide to be a man? And usually the answer is, what are you, crazy? I always knew I was a man.
Right.
That's your gender identity. I have a dear friend that helps do some of the presentations around New York State. And she says, imagine that you're on a desert island and there's no one else on the island. There's no outside interference. There's no billboards, no radio, no TV, no boats, no planes, no trains. There's nothing. There's water, a beach, you're on it. And let's make it even better. You're naked. Hopefully you're sitting on a leaf, a little more comfortable. Right?
Close to sand.
Right. But at that moment in time, do you know who you are? Do you need those outside interferences to know who you are? And I think for the most part, almost 100% of the people would say, of course I know who I am. I'm a, and then self-identification. So that's your gender identity. It's how you know yourself.
So Julie, what's the difference between, so you're right. I would say I'm cisgender, and, so I woke up and I looked in the mirror and said, I'm a boy. So why doesn't that work out for everyone? I mean, what's going on when someone looks in the mirror, that has a certain type of anatomy, but sees them as a different gender?
Feels a different way.
What's going on there?
Well, one of the things that we go over when we do our training is, first of all, we make it clear that the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and the American Psychological Association all agree that being transgender is basically a condition where there's a disconnect between how your brain is mapped and your physical body that you were born in. In 2018 in the Netherlands, they've done some studies with transgender people. And what they found is that their brains, transgender people's brains, work and function like the brain that they identify as, not the sex that they were given the designation of when they were first born. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means, for example, a trans woman like me, if they were to study my brain, most likely they would find that my brain works similarly to a cisgender woman. Conversely, a trans man's brain would work similarly to a cisgender man's brain. And the key here to understand is, and this is where a lot of people have problems understanding, is that when we tell you this is who we are, this isn't a lifestyle, this isn't a preference. No one would go through the things that we go through, and the discrimination and the hate and the bias. No one would go through this because I want to. It's a problem of, this is who we actually are. This is our makeup. This is our biology. And further, when we talk about, for example, why people are gay or straight or whatever they happen to be, again, researchers are finding that there is a connection to the brain and biology. Now, we don't know all the specifics. We're, just starting to scratch the surface. But when LGBTQIA people say, this is who we are, this is who we are.
Absolutely.
So is there also a genetic component? I mean, is there research? Tell us about that.
Well, I don't know if we have, super terrific, oh, well, this happens, then this happens, then this happens. But we are noticing, for example, there are many, some of the more interesting stories that I've had is that, like, I had a trans friend who's unfortunately passed away, but one of their favorite stories is that, they were struggling with their identity, and they finally decided to, start coming out and going out and so forth. And they went someplace a little bit different, went out to some type of, trans event or something, and they ended up running into their brother. So it happens, but it doesn't happen. Like, for example, just because you're transgender doesn't mean your relatives are transgender. It just, we don't know enough to be able to put everything together yet. But we do know that, again, it does have an impact. The way your brain is wired has an impact. And I will add that the term dysphoria is that
your dysphoria, right?
Yeah, your dysphoria, your gender dysphoria, is the difference between your comfort level and what your eyes see on your body. So there is a huge discomfort for some transgender people when they look in the mirror and they go, "Oh my God, I hate my body." Seriously.
We've heard that. We've heard that.
Yeah. And some of us have less of it. I feel like I've got, dysphoria light. I'm very, when I look in the mirror, I'm comfortable with who I am. But, others aren't. I mean, it's just, it's everyone's lived experiences.
So when you have gender dysphoria, I mean, what's left for you? You identify that. What can you do? I mean,
well, depending on, the severeness of your gender dysphoria, and for many people, it is severe. Really, you're at a point where you probably need to start making modifications to your body to have your body more closely match your gender.
Your gender.
So I think that's important to understand. But one of the things that I think cisgender people always think is that everyone in the transgender community goes through a complete surgery, hormones, and the whole thing in their, to quote unquote gender transition. And what we do when we do our trainings is we talk about, and again, you have to imagine Long Island, and I'm sure that may not be easy for everyone, but at the farthest point east on Long Island is a town called Montauk.
Oh,
and in New York State, you cannot go any further east.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the furthest east. So we use a trip on the Long Island Railroad as a metaphor for gender transition. And people are like, wait, what? Well, basically, when you are if you're going to ride on the Long Island Railroad, it starts in Penn Station in Manhattan, which is a completely separate island from Long Island. And the way I explain it is that we're all going to get on the train on our way to Montauk, which is the final step in your complete transition. You can't go any further. And so your first stop could be Jamaica. And what happens is that there are people on the train that look out the window and say, Jamaica's kind of a cool place. I think I'm going to get off and check it out. So a group of people get off the train. Some of those people that get off the train go, Jamaica, this is great. I love this place. I belong here. I feel really good about it. And there's a group of people that got off and went, it's nice, but it's not what I want. And I think I should go to Montauk. So the second, they get back on the train. So the second stop, let's say it's Freeport. Same thing happens. A group of people get off. Some people get off in Freeport and go, I love this place. This is where I feel most comfortable. This is great. And another group of people are like, yeah, it's okay. I still want to get to Montauk. And they get back on the train to Montauk. And let's say the third stop is Massapequa. Same thing happens. Group of people get off. One group says, I love it here. One group says, nah, I think I'll get back on and go to Montauk. And there is also a group that says, you know what? I'd have been better off at Freeport, and I'm going to take the train back.
Wow.
So when that train loads up in Penn Station, it's a full train. By the time we get to Montauk, there's a lot less people on that train. So then I ask, well, why wouldn't everyone just want to get on the train and go right to Montauk? Come on, why wouldn't you want to do that? And so we start talking about, well, first of all, major surgery. How many people can do major surgery? Are there any people that it would be unsafe to do major surgery? Well, gosh, yes, there's a whole lot of people that couldn't do major surgery. Okay, good. And when we're talking about major surgery, is there any cost associated with it? Oh my gosh, yes, it's major surgery. We're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. Well, trans people don't have money, so money could be an issue. How about a loving relationship? How about when your wife says, I can deal with you at Freeport, but if you go to Massapequa, we're done. How about your job? How about your career? Let's say you're a big fancy dancy sales manager. You take clients out every Friday out golfing, and you're talking about big accounts and so forth. And you've decided you're going to start taking hormones and grow breasts. How comfortable is your customer going to be out on the golf links wearing your Nike shirt with an athletic bra? Probably not too much. And so there's a whole host of reasons why people don't go all the way to Montauk for their transition and stop somewhere along the line, which is, at least for them, the best place that they could be for now. That doesn't mean some people won't get on the train later on and go to Montauk or further east.
Right.
And that also means that some people may not go back the other direction.
Right.
So it's important to understand, because when you have political leaders, people in charge of agencies that are, for example, well, you can't use the ladies' room unless you have surgery.
Oh boy.
You can't change your name until I have a certificate that says you have surgery. Well, what you're doing is saying then everybody else that gets off at all the other stations before Montauk are not allowed to be able to have the rights,
right?
Unless they quote unquote have surgery.
Validated them as human beings.
So using the metaphor, when should the person have the right? When they get on the train at Penn Station, when they hit Jamaica? I mean, when should someone be able to be, this is my gender identity, and I should be able to get the gender markers changed and have that reflected. When on the journey should that happen?
When you bought the ticket in Penn Station.
The ticket.
Absolutely.
When you and you know what? That ticket doesn't cost anything. It just says, you know, I think I'm non-binary. I think I'm transgender. Ticket bought.
Julie, the way you've just presented it, do you have a book coming out? You need to.
I don't have time.
It's like the most concise I've ever heard anyone speak of it. And, people ask me and Stephen all the time, and the questions they ask, I'm really horrified a lot of the time. I always say, everyone wants to learn about what's going on downstairs. Oh, is there still a penis? Oh, is there a vagina? Is there this? Is there that? That is none of anybody's business. And you just brought up a really good analogy. Wherever a person they get on the train in the beginning, and whatever stop they choose to get off of is exactly where they need to be. And you said it. Maybe, they'll get off halfway, and then maybe years later, they're going to go all the way to Montauk. But how do we get that concept out there in the real world? Right now, most people's perception, right, of trans, I hate the way it was glorified in the entertainment industry. Modeling campaigns a few years ago, I think, was it Calvin Klein or it was Barney's? It had all these beautiful transgender couples. And I remember thinking, no one, you're presenting it, it's so completely unreal, because my perception, I've heard the stories as you have time and time over again, and it is no cakewalk. So how do we get the real truth out there? How do we get people to understand what it is?
Well, I would say, first of all, your show. That's exactly one way of doing it. And that's why, we've become yes people. Yes, we will do this. Yes, we will appear. Yes, we will go there. Yes, we will talk. But this is what I call trench warfare. It's one brain at a time. And, I think the thing is that when we do our trainings, across New York State, we make it clear to the audience that within those four walls, they can ask us anything that they want. If they want to ask about plumbing, we'll talk about plumbing. If they want to, whatever it is that they want to ask, we're willing to talk about. But we also make it clear that once we step outside of those four walls, those questions are not acceptable. And if you would not ask a cisgender person that question, you should not ask us that question.
Yeah, thank you for making that clear.
Really. Yeah.
So it's important for everybody to understand that. But with that, I've also found, now that we've used the Long Island Railroad analogy.
I love that it's IRR.
Right. People will come to me and go, so, you told me that you're married to a cisgender heterosexual woman, and yet, you're trans, and how do you, what, and I go, look, I stopped at Jamaica. Oh,
that's fantastic. Oh,
right.
Makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, they can. That's something that people can actually grasp and understand. You've mentioned these trainings a lot through our program. If anybody who's watching wanted to find out about them, what would they do? How did they find out about them?
Well, our website, genderequalityny.org, has them. You can join our mailing list. We are actually doing our first virtual forum this coming Thursday, and I did that on purpose. I thought that we would be, getting a very small crowd, maybe a dozen people if we were lucky, and it would be a great way of learning how to do a virtual forum without having any disasters occur. Right. Wouldn't you know that we sold out at 90 people in 1 week. So we've actually had to turn people away. But our plan is to, on a regular basis, and that I mean almost monthly, probably not monthly, but almost monthly, do these on a regular basis. And what we're finding is that teachers, guidance counselors are writing to us and wanting to make sure that they, have an opportunity to come to these and so forth. So it's real positive as far as that goes.
I tell you, I attended one in Hurleyville, and I absolutely loved it and came out and felt like I had learned so much. And I cannot speak GENY or Gender Equality New York and your praise is highly enough. If you get a
That's
chance
great.
to go to one of these forums virtually live, go to it. You will learn a lot.
Yeah, we try, and the thing is that we constantly modify the presentation. So it's not like, oh, we did it, it's canned, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Because a lot of terminology is changing. A lot of discussion has to be modified. And a lot of our panelists will come back and go, I'm uncomfortable with the way you said that. I think you should really say it like this, whatever this is. And we'll look at it and go, you know what, I love that. Let's make that modification. So we're constantly improving it, and we've been doing it now for a while, so we think it's pretty tight.
So Julie, another kind of going back to my respectfully ignorant person. So, often I'll see when people sign things, they'll have below their signature pronouns, and it might be he, him, his, she, her, hers, or they, their, theirs. What's going on here? Why are people doing this?
Well, I think first of all, pronouns are a way. You have to understand, especially if you're a trans person or a non-binary person, the reality is that names and pronouns are important to us. Every time someone uses the appropriate pronoun or our chosen name, we're validated. This means that the world is accepting us. So that's why it's quote unquote important. One of the things that comes up a lot in our presentations is that, well, what happens if I meet this person and I'm not really sure, they sort of look female, but they sort of look male, and I don't know what to do, and what do I do? And our answer is very straightforward. We can tell you that throughout the town halls and forums that we've done, 99.9% of transgender and non-binary people want you to ask what our pronouns are, because that's a way of showing respect.
Of course.
Now, the other thing you can do is normalize it. And by that, I mean that the cisgender person seeing a trans or non-binary person and unsure about what pronouns to use would walk over pre-COVID, reach out with their hand and go, "Hi, my name is Mary and my pronouns are she, her, hers. What's your name and what's your pronouns?" Smooth, everything's fine. One of the things that we tell organizations, if they want to become truly inclusive, is on their emails, under their signature line, put down your pronoun. On your ID badges, show pronouns. Because if you show pronouns, you tell us this is a welcoming place, this is an inclusive place, and we get it.
Just a few letters, and you make a world of difference.
Yeah. It also respect. It's also showing respect.
But okay, so this was one I actually got today when I was talking about that I was going to bring this up. They, the they pronoun, because it seems like people have a huge disconnect with the they pronoun. It's like, how is that used? Is that a singular word now? Is that grammatically correct? I mean,
Well, first of all, for people have to understand that language changes over time. However, they, them, theirs in Old English was singular. When people referred to the Queen, they are not amused. We've heard that before in things to do.
Right. That's where
exactly. So it was a part of the English language, just like you. When you point you, there could be 10 people. You are going over there. 10 people move over there. It could be one person, you. You doesn't just mean one person. You could be many people. All right.
I grew up in the Bronx. They used to use the word use.
Well, yeah, use, right. Exactly. They still do.
I'm not sure about the they, I use the use.
Right. Exactly.
Y'all.
Right.
Well, yeah, now more and more are using y'all. But as far as that goes, the reality is that for the most part, I would say, at least in New York State, it may be different in the other coast, but in New York State, I would say 90% of non-binary people are using they, them, theirs as their pronouns. A smaller percentage, very, very much smaller percentage, uses no pronouns at all and just uses their name. So, Julie ate Julie's dinner. type of thing. And then there are some people who use Z and here as pronouns. Those are a little bit harder, but from a standpoint of at least what we see in New York State, we don't see that very often. Now, the reality is that young people are also coming up with new pronouns. And the real reality here is that, again, as we talked about, you don't have to understand someone's gender identity to respect it. You don't have to understand their self-identification to respect it. And you don't have to understand their pronouns to respect it. Simply ask the question, get the information, and then try to use it as best you can to show a regard and a respect for that person.
Regard,
Absolutely.
respect, and communicate.
And we're saying if they, theirs, or they, them, theirs, it's not comfortable. Good gracious, what's up with me?
It's not comfortable, right?
Not comfortable for you, then learn it. Practice. Practice using it. That's so easy. It doesn't. You shouldn't just dismiss it out of hand, saying, "Well, I can't do that." Well, obviously you can because you're an adult and have a brain. So practice, learn.
Well, I think the thing too is that's the same thing regarding our chosen and preferred names. A lot of us may not have the money or the time or the energy yet to legally change our name. And so we walk around with, our chosen name as part of our identity. And people who knew us before transition will sometimes say, well, I'll never be able to get this straight. Well, what you're really saying is that I just really don't feel like putting the effort in to make the change.
It's disregarding somebody.
Exactly.
Respectful. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And we've got questions here tonight.
Yes, we've got questions. Kind of where we are and kind of like understanding and all that good stuff. So Samantha Spillane asks, what do you say to high school health class grads when they say you can't change biology? You're either XX or XY.
Well, the last part of the third sentence, you're either XX or XY, is absolutely untrue. You can be XXY, you can be XYY. There are a number of things you can be. So when they say, you can't change biology, you're right. You cannot change biology. But also that shows that people are stuck still on the biological sex and the gender identity. And they're still believing that gender is somehow connected solely by your biological sex. And the reality is, especially for cisgender people, they have a hard time understanding that gender identity may not match your biological sex.
Right.
So when I see those type of comments, first of all, the last sentence, as I said, was incorrect because you can be more than just XX or XY. But then I'll have someone go, oh, well, that's a small number of people. Well, they exist.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, they exist. But again, the real issue here is an unwillingness to understand that gender identity is separate from biological sex. The way sometimes I explain it is that cisgender people think of gender identity and biological sex as a grilled cheese sandwich. It's just this thing. It's all stuck together. You can't pull it apart. It's this grilled cheese sandwich. But trans people and non-binary people see this thing as two pieces of bread and 3 slices of cheese. And the cheese is different than the bread. They may be melted together, but they are separate things. They are separate ingredients. Right. And the sooner that we understand that gender identity differs from biological sex, the sooner we can just move forward. Coming out as Julie, I am 90% sure, I never got tested, but I'm pretty sure I'm, XY? But that doesn't have anything to do with my gender identity. It just has to do with my biology.
Great. And so I hope those health class grads now know their stuff.
Now you know what to say.
So Julie, we have a question from Simone. First off, she says, thank you, Julie, for all your drive to get the GENDA Act through. Could you explain a little bit about the public accommodations and if there are any exemptions with certain businesses?
Okay, well, in New York State, the GENDA Act is the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act. That is the transgender civil rights here in New York State. And what it did was it made it clear that any harassment or discrimination in the areas of public education, housing, employment, credit, and education was no longer legal. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is glorious and the sun came out and there's no discrimination here in New York State. What it means is that when someone discriminates against us, we can now take them to court, make them pay, and get them to change their policy or procedures or whatever the heck it is that they're doing.
So a leg to stand on now because of this.
Yeah. So I hope that helps a little bit. We can go into more detail, but I think that's basically the answer there.
Okay, and let's see. I thought I saw another question.
By the way, my friend Belinda Zalato from Australia is on. I don't even know what time it would be there. Thank you for being on. And she says you have to have a book come out.
Oh.
So Francisco wrote, and had to phrase this into a question, but she said, perhaps mention that many LGBT people are now trying to make up for missed opportunities, I guess, in terms of our alliance. An example is the Imperial Court of New York is doing a Transgender Day of Remembrance virtual
I'm speaking at
on
that panel.
11/20.
Right.
And that's
I think that there's no question that there are a number of people. I wish that we could say it was the majority, because I really don't feel that. But again, I'm going to warn everybody that is colored by my experiences over the past almost 20 years with the way the community reacted and didn't react and so forth. It wasn't that long ago. We have to remember that HRC supported the ENDA bill, and the ENDA bill, which is the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, it did not include transgender and non-binary people. And they went to push it through under George W. Bush. They had no chance of it passing in any way, shape, or form. And they still fractured our community and moved us out. Now, obviously, that's no longer an issue. That bill is dead and gone. But that was just 12 years ago.
I remember being in law school and having these arguments with fellow law school classmates and outlaws. I mean, no, we should not. We should support ENDA. We should not support GENDA. Our rights are first. And it's like, at the time, I don't even necessarily remember how receptive I was, because, again, I didn't understand the concept of gender identity, and I didn't know a trans person. So I might have at the time said, yes, I think we should just pursue ENDA because we have a better shot. But now I realize, oh, that was really not smart.
Polarizing.
And now that I've, learned more about these issues and have met more people who are trans and intersex and non-binary, how that can really flavor your thoughts and becoming true allies with one another.
Julie, don't you think, though, and I meet so many young people too that are transitioning, don't you think that going forward, that's going to be the way in? You know what I'm saying? That things that are going to be influenced in past and have power behind them will be that generation that's in their 20s into 30s, that they're going to carry the baton next. Because from what all of our experiences, you said it, 20 years, you've seen a lot. But I have to believe, because I want to believe, right, going forward, that the youth are going to be able to make some inroads in this.
I think you're right, and I would love to believe that. The key here is, and a lot's going to depend, for example, even on this election, are young people going to vote? Now, initial polling says that young people are voting like in numbers that have never been seen before.
Okay.
And if that's the case, then I buy into that. And I buy into the fact that they are going to be an important part in changing the world. But I also remember, being a part of the, Summer of Love and all that other baloney. That,
I was there in that Summer of Love.
Right. We were going to change the world. And, big oil is still big oil. In fact, big oil is bigger and badder, if you will. We have a president who does not feel connected to the LGBT community, and more specifically, hateful towards the trans and non-binary community.
I mean,
so,
Tiffany Trump did some bizarre rally where she said the LGBTQ population. It's like, that's interesting. I've never heard anybody skip the T before. I've heard the other letters, but I was like, isn't that telling?
Yes.
T for Tiffany.
Yeah. With like she's often forgotten.
Right.
Maybe
like
that
she's
was her
often
thought.
forgotten.
So yeah, I mean.
So you said something when we spoke earlier this week. It's something that I really do want to read because I wrote it down. It affected me so much. We spend too much energy being stirred up about what we can't change. Let's focus on what we can. Mm. So for you, Julie, with your agenda going forward, and none of us know how this election's going to turn out, what is your game plan?
Well, there's actually two game plans. The game plan, first of all, is depending on what happens with this election. If we should flip the Senate and continue to hold the House, then working on the Equality Act, which will be basically the GENDA, if you will, for LGBT people, LGBTQIA plus people, will need to have work done. So we will focus on that. If we don't flip the Senate, or if for some reason we should lose the House and we don't change the presidency, then our focus will remain on New York State and making as many changes as we can to New York State as possible. Now, even if everything positively happened in the federal government, we will still continue to work on New York State issues because we have a community here that we are specifically addressing. It is part of our mission. But we certainly will put a lot more effort into federal, issues if things are positive. Mm-hmm. However, if they're not positive, we may stay in bed the day after Election Day or the day after the election is finally announced and put the covers over our head. But we will get out of bed and we will start working back on the New York stuff, the New York State stuff that we've been working on as it is anyway.
Right. That will make a difference and affect people's lives. And I think that's a really important thing. And, we started out, Stephen and I, talking about our pre-election anxiety. At the end of the day, no matter what happens, every one of us here can do something and will do something. And that's what we have to remember.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. So let's see, a couple more quick questions before we begin to close up. But James McIsaac says that his trans friends are open to questions from him, but their lives are, let me try to get this, but their lives are normal to him because they relate mentally. James said, you mentioned crossing the line when being asked questions. When is it not appropriate if you're asking questions to strangers?
Well, I would say anytime you're speaking to strangers, you should not cross the line. I had a personal situation that occurred. I had an opportunity back in 2015 to appear on an interview show that was, I actually had to go into the city to the CBS studios to tape it. And the host, I could tell, just couldn't wait to ask the question, of how much surgery I'd had and, what did I do to my body and so forth. And I explained it, but I realized at that point in time, what I really should have said is, just before I came on, you interviewed a woman. Did you think about asking whether she had had a hysterectomy or not? The last man that you had sitting in the seat, did you ask if he was circumcised or not?
Yeah, right.
And if you wouldn't do that for them, then why are you doing it with me? That said, I will now answer your question. But,
yeah.
Whoa.
That's always when they say, you always think of what you should say after.
Right.
But I mean, it does. I mean, that kind of stuff will take you by surprise. I mean,
of course.
I don't get it as much. People tend to understand the concept of gay now. But I mean, I remember recently, my husband was asked, oh, have you ever had sex with a woman? And then, how far did you penetrate? And it's like, what kind of question is that?
I know.
And I'm like,
oh my God.
I was like, when in what galaxy would you think that's an appropriate thing to ask?
Exactly. Obviously, good taste should always rule the day.
Thank you. Really, right. I was there when that
Good taste should
happened.
always rule the day. That should be your rule of thumb when thinking about what questions to ask someone.
Mary has a great question.
So Mary's question, I mean, she says, if you're trans and involved, I mean, she uses a martial arts gym in New York and say that somehow would you be protected under the public accommodations of the Gender Act, taking part in that studio?
And the answer is absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Here's the real key in my mind. What should be done, not only in martial arts gyms or any place else, not only in schools, but anywhere there is a place where there's a question about privacy. There should be a single person unit, whether it's a changing room, a locker room, whatever you want to call it, for anyone.
Right.
Because if I'm going to, for example, if I'm going to use the women's locker room, there should be a place for cisgender women who might feel uncomfortable with me in there to be able to use it themselves.
Right.
And one of the things that I run into with a lot of schools is like, oh, we don't have a lot of money for like major. I understand, but you can't force our trans or non-binary students to use just that locker room.
Wrong.
And if you have people that are uncomfortable with us, we get it, no problem. Let them use it. Because we have the same rights as everyone else. There can be no different rules here in New York State for cisgender people and trans people. That's not how it works. No longer in New York State.
It was so interesting. I encountered something dealing with public accommodations and changing rooms, and it seemed like the arguments that the opponents were making was like, oh, well, we tried to offer reasonable accommodations. And I was like, well, this isn't the ADA. We're not talking about the American with Disabilities Act. We're talking about a public accommodations law. So it doesn't matter if you give someone reasonable accommodations. You have to let them use the changing room of their gender identity. It really is that simple.
Absolutely.
If you want to reasonably accommodate the person that's uncomfortable with that, go ahead.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And I do think that should be done. I mean, I get it. I personally, if I was going to be at the martial arts gym, I personally would probably use the single one. However, I would not use the single restroom. I would use the ladies' restroom. I mean, it's one thing to use a restroom where it's enclosed, you do your business, you wash your hands and you leave. It's another where I'm stripping down and rebuilding. So, it's a different situation. But I mean, that should be each person's choice. And that choice should be respected and understood for cisgender people as well as for trans people.
Absolutely.
We agree.
So, Julie, as we close up, we usually give the floor to our guests. Are there any plugs you'd like to make? Any shout outs you'd like to make? The floor is yours.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're going to make this real fast. Amazingly, I recently this year came out to some of my closest college friends, and I think I was told at least a few of them may be on this showing. So a big hello to them. I have to tell you that I have been amazed at how supportive my friends have been. We graduated back in 1975, so this is a long period of time, and I was concerned with whether or not they'd be able to handle it. And I have to tell you, they have been amazing in their support for me. So that's been a real positive. And I guess the message that I'd like to leave is just for people to understand that when we talk about transgender people or non-binary people, or for that matter, intersex people, we are talking about people that are could be someone's partner or lover, someone's child, someone's parent, someone's neighbor, someone's coworker. I mean, you have to understand we're human beings. And what we're looking for is just simply respect. A lot of people want to get involved in what's right and what's wrong. But the reality is being human and loving humans and taking care of humans is what we should be doing. And it doesn't matter whether you're Republican, and it doesn't matter whether you live in Florida or you live in Washington State. We are here. We need to take care of each other. And we sure know this for a fact right now during COVID. So I just hope that people will really think about the fact that, you know, if their child or their parent or their brother in the process of coming out, try to see if you can save a little bit of respect and try to see if you can understand that person, because your love and respect will go a long way in helping that person, you know, get through this major decision and major hump in their life.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Beautiful. So thank you so much, Julie. And to everybody out there, I think we are all very, very anxious right now, no matter whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent.
We can share that.
So please, please, please take care of yourself. Do what you can to get through these days. And no matter what happens, we will be okay. We will get through this. We will push forward. If the work's different than what we were hoping the work would be, then we'll do that work. But we will get through this. And I just take care of yourselves and much, much love.
And take care of the people that you love, okay? Because we are all in this together.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will see you next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.